Hey guys, so let's talk about mustache rail installation today because it is a video that has been widely requested. So I'm gonna do two things for this video. One, I'm gonna assume you know how to take your board apart because if you're gonna go ahead and put your board back together, I'm hoping you guys can take it apart. So taking it apart is gonna be a lot easier than putting it together. Just put all of your screws in a single tray and we'll go from there. So your board's all disassembled here. I'm also going to assume the other thing, that you don't have a mismatched axle block. So I have a regular axle block here, and then I have one tech rails block over here. There is a specific reason for it, but I don't need to get into it for this video. So first thing I'm going to do is make sure that my rails are lined up the right way. So when I put them together and look at them down the rails, there is a gap down one end here, and that's going to be the battery end. So automatically I'm going to know this is my left rail and this is my right rail. So I'm going to grab the left rail first. I'm going to put the right rail over here. I don't actually need it for right now. So I know this gets a little bit funky and everyone's going to have their own preferences. For some reason, I do the controller box first. The reason that I do this first is because I saw this on, or I didn't see this. This is how I do the lightning rails. And lightning rails, for some reason, you have to do the controller box first. Otherwise, it constantly feels like there's not enough cable for it. So I've always done the controller box first. You can do it however you want. For the mustache rails, it doesn't really matter because there is some cable slack left over. So you got your Torx 25 and you're grabbing your non-short bolts. So the good part about the OneWheel GT is you basically use all of the same bolt until you get down to the bumper. So you don't even need to worry about these till you get down to the bumper. You are going to attach that rail. Now, with that rail attached, I am going to flip that on its side, and then on top of that, I'm going to flip the tire on its side and position that underneath the rail, because that is going to be the future of my setup. And since I don't know where that axle block is immediately, it's going to be a little bit off time. So under normal circumstances with a regular block, the regular axle block, there's a notch in the top here. That is how you tell where is up. And normally I would also just start with this block directly in the rail and shove it in there. But because I'm using the tech rails box, it's going to be a little bit different. I am going to first get that cover over top, and I'm going to make sure that I've got enough room for these screws, because if you don't, then things wind up getting cross-threaded. So on here, I don't know if you can see, but I have a little raise to this bench where I'm actually going to set the other axle of the tire when I set the block on there. And that is going to give me a straight shot to start driving these in evenly. And I want to make sure it's evenly because unfortunately with this block, I don't get the benefit of the doubt of the alignment that I get with the stock block. Okay, so now that the motor is, for the most part, hooked up to the single side, I can now flip the whole board over. The motor stays on. It is pretty much aligned here. And then I have a lot of room to put my motor on. And so again, why are people breaking their motor rings? They're breaking their motor rings because they're either reaching their fingers up there and there's not a lot of room here because of the way the rails stick down, the way this little port is like a little bit smaller than even the pint was, and a lot of people broke their ports on the pint, trust me. So when you're getting this, you can't really feel for it, or even more, they're using some kind of heavier plier, needle nose or otherwise, that is just using a little bit too much force on it, and it's causing those rings to break. I'm sorry, but it's not any one of those two. It's not any much more than one of those two things, and it's unfortunate how just how delicate these things were, really. Okay, so anyways, under normal circumstances, this thing is just going to be attached to your wheel, right? So only take this off if you actually did the removal where you undid the cable harness, you undid the little clips under here, and you slid the motor out. You don't need to do that for this one. So since it's all lined up on that side, that's the nice part. When you go to put this rail on, everything's lined up the way that you want it to be. You want to make sure that cable is tucked under and you got a straight shot into the axle bolts. But we can go ahead and then do these top bolts here. And again, it's up to you to decide how you want to put these back together. But as long as you kind of have this guideline, you understand you're not doing anything wrong. Because once the second rail is on, everything gets a whole ton easier. So the top rail is on, and I can grab, well, I don't know where the other one is. I can grab both my axle bolts here, and I can get started in fixing those guys. Good. So now my bolts are in both sides of the board, and my frame is basically put together. The other option you have here is you can put the foot pad on when you're doing that too, because, you know, I don't have the tiniest fingers, but I also don't have like giant mega hands like Tom Plevel does in Pittsburgh. So if you have giant banana hands, just be careful in here. All right, putting this all back together, because that is how things are getting broken. Same thing for the foot pad ring, just we can get foot pad for it, so it makes it a little bit more tolerable to break them in the first place. If you like these pads that you see on the board, you're gonna get those from Riley Johnson. Yes, the Riley Johnson, that won the OneWheel Underground, that guy, he's really fast. They're called Control Freaks. So, I'm gonna put the pads on here. So I'm grabbing 4 bolts to fix them on top. I like to do the least amount of flipping to the board possible when I'm working on these things, so that's why you'll see me do groups of bolts at the same time. So I'm gonna do these top 4 foot pad bolts. And I know the bolts on the far side of the board aren't done yet, these ones. I'll do those last. Flip the board over, 4 more bolts. You don't need the short ones yet. And there's only a couple places where the short ones are actually absolutely necessary. If you like the hardware that you see, it is Tech Rails hardware, titanium. And OneWheel Parts sells titanium hardware, as does ProRide. Good. Got all that on, and the reason my board was apart to begin with is I was doing some badgering. It is going to be a wet season this season. El Nino is back. La Nina is gone. That means we are going to get warmer, wetter weather this year. You're already seeing a lot of the wetter weather happening. So this bumper, when you get bumpers and you use them for a little while, they'll hold on to bolts. So this one's holding on to 4 bolts back here. I just want to remind you, that is the size bolt you are using for the rear 4 and the front 2. So these front 2 pads, these front 2 bolts right here, kind of on the front of the bumper, those are going to get short bolts. And then of course I have 4 bolts in the rear, and 3 of these bolts are already in, so I can really just 1, 2, 3, and then I got 1 more short bolt over here. There's some dirt in here, so hang on a second. So if your bumper doesn't fit right away, definitely take it off and investigate why, because it should. And so, I see I've got a bunch of gunk in here. It's gonna prevent a good narrative here. Good. 1, 2. Good. And then, oop, you know what? I did the wrong one here. I need a tight. There we go. Titanium in the rear. We just need 2 more up front here. 1, 2. And then of course, last but not least, keep this in mind also when you're doing your Mustache rails, is that sort of unlike the lightning rails, which can only take just a couple of bumpers, the Mustache rails can take any bumper. You just got to modify the sides here. You cut off the little arms and then the bumper just fits right over top. So that's pretty much it. The 4 bolts are gonna go in right there, and my Mustache rails are ready to go. Obviously I'm gonna tighten up that far side that I didn't do before I drill it too, and that will complete the whole cycle here. So it's just these last 2 bolts here that gotta go in a little bit further, and we're good to go. So other than that, this is how you set up Mustache rails board. I hope you learned something, and you feel empowered to put your own board together and take it apart. Especially when you're dealing with the shops, a lot of times the tear down and the put back together of the board is the 2 parts that wind up taking quite a bit of time away from the attention to what might be broken or what needs to be fixed. So the more you kind of understand how to do this stuff yourself, the more you're also helping the professionals that are trying to help you. So that's it. I got 1 more bolt. I gotta find it. It fell down on the ground somewhere, just like bolts like to do. That's pretty much it. If you have any questions, hit me up.